My name is Jeff Evely. I'm the primary organizer for this event, and my team and I have brought together a panel of experts and those with lived experience, the harms of gender ideology. I myself am the father of a victim of gender ideology, also a 20-year veteran of the Canadian Armed Forces with tours in Afghanistan and Iraq. We have a really great lineup of speakers here for you tonight. We have trans man Scott Nugent from the United States, who has been a really powerful voice against childhood medical transition. We also have Mia Hughes, who wrote the WPATH files, McDonald-Laurier Institute, and GenSpect. We have Barry Neufeld, who was fined $750,000 by the BC Human Rights Tribunal for opposing SOGI programming in schools. We have Kelly Lynn Pierre, who is a detransitioner and founder of Detrans Alliance Canada. We have Faith Rouleau, who is with us from GenSpec as well, a young detransitioner, 26 years old, medicalized as an adolescent. We have Chris Fleury, who's a lawyer representing Canadian Women for Sex-Based Rights in the case to get males out of women's prisons, and yours truly as well. So thank you all so much for coming. This is the issue of our era, and this childhood medical transition, quite frankly, is the sickest thing to ever happen in Canada, and it needs to stop. So it's going to be pretty rapid fire. We're on a schedule. I'll bring up our first speaker now, Mia Hughes.
Okay, how's that? How's the sound? It's okay. Right, thank you all for being here. I'm going to use my 15 minutes tonight to talk about something called Brandolini's Law, which you can think of as the misinformation asymmetry principle. The idea is simple. It takes an order of magnitude more effort to refute misinformation than it does to produce it. And nowhere is this more obvious than in the debate surrounding gender medicine. Because what those of us trying to expose the truth about this scandal are dealing with is not careful evidence-based communications, but slogans, catchy, emotionally compelling, effortlessly repeated slogans. And they're all misinformation. So tonight, I'm going to expend an enormous amount of energy explaining the complicated truth behind some of transactivism's favorite catchphrases. First up, protect trans kids. Sounds great, right? We all want to protect children. But wait a minute, who are these trans kids? And from what danger do they need protection? The truth is, trans kids are just gender non-conforming children who are told by well-meaning adults, deeply misguided adults, that their likes and dislikes define their sex. The official difference between a trans child and a gender non-conforming child is the trans child knows that they are a member of the opposite sex. They are able to detect an inner gender essence that doesn't match their body, even as young as 2 years old. And if they declare that inner identity to the world, it's our job to believe them. The child leads. What absolute madness. We're talking about children who still believe in Santa Claus and the Tooth Fairy, and we're treating them as if they can tell us something profound about their identity. But when activists march in the streets chanting protect trans kids, they aren't just talking about young children. They also mean adolescents, the girls and some boys too, who have flooded the waiting rooms of pediatric gender clinics over the past decade. These are just kids muddling their way through puberty, as all adolescents have always done. But they have the misfortune of coming of age in an era that offers them trans as an explanation for their normal pubertal woes. This group exploded into existence in 2015, And the reason for that is hardly complicated, because 2014 was the year Laverne Cox appeared on the cover of Time magazine with the headline, "The Transgender Tipping Point, America's Next Civil Rights Frontier." And with that, the modern trans rights movement launched its powerful international messaging campaign. Trans-identified celebrities were suddenly everywhere. Trans characters appeared in children's books and television shows. Trans influencers multiplied with astonishing speed online, and schools began teaching gender identity ideology as if it was scientific fact. The message adolescents received was simple. If you hate your body, that could mean you're trans. And right on cue, legions of confused adolescents who hate their developing bodies began showing up at gender clinics, believing themselves to be trans. When activists say protect trans kids, protect these kids, what they actually mean is protect their right to unproven, irreversible medical interventions that imprint their adolescent identities onto their bodies, long before they can grasp what's at stake. So to put it bluntly, children and adolescents need protection from the very people who believe that there is such a thing as a trans kid. Slogan number 2, gender-affirming care is evidence-based. Sounds completely plausible. If doctors are going to interfere with the natural development of healthy youth based on inner subjective feelings, with drugs that have the potential to sterilize them and rob them of their sexual function, and with surgeries to remove healthy body parts, surely they're doing so with a solid scientific base to back them up, right? Wrong. The puberty suppression experiment began in an Amsterdam clinic in 1987, and for the first couple of decades, it remained relatively contained. The big moment came in 2014 when the Dutch published the second of 2 small but pivotal studies. 55 young people who had had their puberty blocked, taken cross-sex hormones, and undergone surgery in a bid to turn them into convincing mimics of the opposite sex. High selection bias, no control group, serious methodological flaws, even one fatality. And yet, the Dutch declared their experiment a roaring success. And remarkably, the international community skipped the vital step of a clinical trial to prove safety and effectiveness, instead adopting the treatment protocol globally and without restraint. This actually happens often in medicine, and there's even a term for it, runaway diffusion, when the medical world mistakes an experiment for proven medical practice and an ineffective or dangerous treatment escapes the lab and gets widely adopted. And note the year of the runaway diffusion, 2014, the precise moment the social contagion began. Now, in science, replication is everything. If a finding is real, it should be repeatable. There have been 2 serious attempts to replicate the dubious positive findings of the Dutch, one in the UK and one in the US. Both failed to show meaningful psychological benefit. But that's not even the worst part. In both cases, the researchers attempted to bury the negative findings and only published years later when forced. Think about that. Their experiment on healthy children failed to demonstrate benefit. And instead of stopping, instead of sounding the alarm, they buried the results so that the experiment could continue. I hardly need say this is not how evidence-based medicine works. In the years since the publication of those Dutch studies, only low-quality evidence of benefit has accumulated. Studies with no control group, high risk of bias, assessing outcomes by self-report rather than objective measures. And all with short follow-up periods, which is something we should linger on for a moment. They give teenagers drugs that can sterilize them and impair their sexual function for life. They amputate the healthy breasts of teenage girls and invert the penises of teenage boys. And then after a year or two, they ask them if they're happy. And because so many say yes, they declare the treatment safe and beneficial. It's quite mad. If you're performing interventions that will impact a young person for the rest of his or her life, you have to follow these kids for 20 years or 30 or 40 before you can even consider calling your experiment a success. So to sum up, all that I've just shared explains why there have now been 17 systematic reviews of the evidence for this treatment protocol to date, and all have found only low to very low quality evidence. And just to be absolutely clear, if a stack of systematic evidence reviews, the gold standard in assessing scientific literature, all unanimously find only the lowest level evidence, you simply cannot call the treatment evidence-based. Slogan number 3, puberty blockers are fully reversible. It is true that when the Dutch first came up with the idea to block the puberty of gender-distressed youth, the drugs were intended to be a fully reversible pause, a way to buy time for these kids to think before making irreversible choices. But as is so often the case in medicine, the new treatment had unintended consequences. Before affirmation and puberty blockers, most gender-distressed youth desisted from their desire to be members of the opposite sex during or after puberty. But the moment puberty blockers were introduced, almost every child put on the drugs progressed across sex hormones, meaning puberty blockers aren't reversible at all, but instead lock in a trans identity and set the stage for lifelong medicalization. Basically, puberty was the natural cure for gender dysphoria. Therefore, if you block puberty, you block the natural cure. Yet gender-affirming clinicians ignored and continue to ignore this dramatic iatrogenic effect. And in fact, just the other day, I was on the website, the Government of Canada website, and I was astonished, but also not in the least bit surprised to see the puberty blockers are fully reversible misinformation still being peddled by our federal government in 2026. Slogan number 4, gender-affirming care is life-saving. Now, we're always hearing trans activists say this, and this particular slogan translates into the despicable ultimatum delivered to parents in pediatric gender clinics. Would you rather a live son or a dead daughter? But here's the thing. This deplorable emotional blackmail was never based on evidence. Every serious review conducted thus far has found no credible evidence linking gender distress to suicide in youth, and no evidence that medical transition prevents it. Even the ACLU's star trans-identified lawyer, Chase Strangio, had to admit so before the Supreme Court of the United States in 2024, because in a courtroom you can't just fling about activist slogans without producing evidence to support them. Add to this the Swedish study that found sharply elevated rates of completed suicide in adults after undergoing medical treatment, and it's simply impossible to call this medical pathway life-saving. It was always activist misinformation, grotesquely overblown and used to coerce parents into consenting to irreversible interventions. Slogan number 5. Every major medical association endorses gender-affirming care. Now, this final one is a little trickier because on the surface, it is true. Almost every major medical association does endorse these interventions. But that doesn't mean what the activists think it means. Let me tell you a little something about this consensus. It's fabricated. The mastermind behind this mirage is an organization called the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, or WPATH. First of all, don't be fooled by the group's carefully crafted facade. WPATH is not a scientific organization. It's an activist group masquerading as a professional medical association. And here's how they manufactured the consensus. Stay with me, it gets a bit complicated. In 2001, WPATH produced standards of care recommending puberty suppression, despite the scientific literature at the time consisting of one single case study. In 2009, WPATH members on the inside of the Endocrine Society produced guidelines recommending this protocol, also based on exceptionally thin evidence. Then in 2012, WPATH produced another set of standards, recommending the unproven treatment, citing the Endocrine 2009, which was based on their own shoddy 2001 document. It's clever, isn't it? But then something remarkable happened. Major medical associations across the globe copied WPATH's 2012 guidelines, trusting that WPATH were the experts, trusting that the protocol was evidence-based, unwittingly endorsing an experiment on healthy kids that lacked any credible scientific support. That is how the so-called consensus was built. In fact, the UK's CAS review that revealed this tangled web of circular citations rated WPATH's guidelines and all based upon them as lacking scientific rigor. Another similar review rated them unanimously as do not recommend. But my personal favorite is a Belgian expert who, when asked why his institution had not formally evaluated WPATH standards of care, replied, "If we had to review them, we'd actually toss them in the bin. That's precisely where they belong." So there you have it, Brandolini's law. It takes an order of magnitude more energy to refute misinformation than it does to produce it. And that was just a taste of what we're up against. The truth is, for the last decade, our governments, both federal and provincial, with the exception of Alberta, have taken the easy option, blindly accepting these activist slogans as fact, while choosing to ignore that nation after nation is abandoning this reckless experiment. By doing so, they have firmly secured their place in history as the leaders who looked the other way as innocent youth fell victim to one of the greatest medical crimes in history. But it's not just our governments who are to blame. Canada's mainstream media, with the exception of the National Post, of course, has failed in its duty to investigate this scandal, instead acting as mouthpieces for trans activists, dutifully regurgitating these slogans. So it falls on all of us to demand change for the sake of all the young people who deserve so much better. Because when those in power choose easy slogans over complex truths, it is vulnerable people who pay the price. Thank you.
So, hi guys, my name's Chris. I'm a constitutional lawyer, and I have the privilege of acting for an organization called CAUSEBAR, Canadian Women. Yeah. That tends to happen when I talk about this. So, as you likely know, Canadian Women's Sex-Based Rights. It's an organization that advocates for the sex-based rights of women and girls in the context of not just prisons, which I'm about to talk about, but also locker rooms, change rooms, university dormitories, sporting events, et cetera, et cetera. So what I'm about to say doesn't, I feel like sort of the odd man out here in a sense that I'm not going to talk about kids or the impact on kids. In order to land yourself in a federal penitentiary, you have to be 18 years or older. So this has nothing to do with the impact on kids. I'm told that there are some overlapping themes, so I'll let you sort of draw your own conclusions about that. So the nature of the claim that CAUSEBAR has brought is it's a claim in the federal court that challenges the placement and transfer of biological males into female institutions. Obviously, they're trans-identifying biological males. We say that that has caused a series of harms to to female inmates. The list of harms is it's pages and pages long in the lawsuit. It ranges from, at the most serious end of the spectrum, we're talking about serious assault, serious sexual assault. At the and I don't mean to minimize anything, but at the lesser end of the spectrum, the reality is there's a spectrum. We're talking about women in forced quarters with male inmates, feeling uncomfortable, anxiety. And what you have to understand about female inmates, and this is true of, I would say, people who've been convicted of crimes in general, is that yes, every female inmate that we're talking about is a perpetrator of a crime. They've been convicted. It's probably been a serious crime to land themselves in a federal institution. But in a very real sense, most of them are victims as well. And female inmates are disproportionately likely to have been the victims of violence, and usually at the hands of men. They've been, again, the victim of domestic violence, or their father, their spouse, whoever it is. And these are the women that are forced to, again, be in confined quarters with male inmates. So we say in the lawsuit that these harms, and I suppose the harms, I could go on forever. There's just so many examples. One, which if you've never been in a female institute, or you've never been in prison, you've never been in a female institution, there's a number of rehabilitative programs. And this is a goal of corrections, because eventually most inmates, male and female, are going to find their way out. They're not going to serve the rest of their life. They're going to find their way out. And when they do, we want them to be rehabilitated. And Correctional Services Canada makes an effort to do that. And there's a number of different programs which are impacted, one of which would be there's something called the mother-daughter program. So you may not appreciate this, that there are actually young children. I believe they age out at 4 or 5. So you'd have young infants up to the age of 4 or 5 in these federal institutions, which male inmates have access to. And the inmates that we're talking about, and I'll get sort of more into this, but we're not talking about, and when I talk about these trans-identified male inmates, we're not speaking, and especially in the lawsuit, we're not speaking about all trans people. And we're not saying all trans people are this and all trans people are that. It's a very small subset of the population that has been sentenced to a federal penitentiary sentence, that the only way to get there is to commit a serious crime, have a lengthy criminal record, and in most cases, both. So it's a very small subset of the population that we're talking about, and then a small subset among that is identifying as trans and seeking a transfer into female institutions. So we say that those harms, and I should say too, we're at a very early point in the lawsuit. No evidence has been presented. It's our responsibility to present the evidence. We're not even at that point yet, and I'll tell you more about that in a bit. But all of which is to say, I'm a little bit reluctant to get too far into what the evidence actually is. But some of it is public, and I'm sure you've read about it. It's been in the media. You've heard these sorts of stories. So we say that these harms constitute a number of breaches of the Charter, of the rights of female inmates under Section 7, so that's security of person, under Section 12, which protects against cruel and unusual punishment, and Section 15, which guarantees equality. So that's the lawsuit in a nutshell. The placement and transfer resulted in harms that constitutes a charter breach. That's the lawsuit in a nutshell. There's an underlying premise to all of this that is perhaps controversial. It's probably going to be contested, and oddly enough, we're probably going to need expert evidence at some point to prove this. And the premise that I'm talking about is that men and women are different. So it's an important point. It's an important point in ways that you wouldn't necessarily appreciate unless you have had some interaction with the justice system. Men and women come into contact with the justice system in different ways. They behave differently while incarcerated, and I'll give you all sorts of examples. But again, just the same way that we're not talking about all trans people, this is not to say that all men are this way and all women are this way. We're talking about overlapping distribution curves. It's likelihood as opposed to certainty that, again, someone is going to act this way. But just to give you a couple examples, men are much more likely to be convicted of a serious violent crime than a woman is. Men are more likely to be repeat offenders. Men are more likely to be dangerous offenders, which is a technical designation under the criminal code. Essentially means you're not getting out of custody. Men are more likely to be sexual offenders. Women are, in general, less of a security risk. They represent less of a flight risk. They try to escape less while incarcerated. And the list goes on. And the question is, do biological male inmates who are identifying as trans, do they behave while incarcerated? And is their risk profile essentially akin to male inmates, or is it female inmates? And it's a trick question. It seems to be, and I don't necessarily have the answer to this, but I would say they seem to be unique. And I'll tell you the statistic that just blew my hair back when I first heard it. So the rate of, if you look at the average among male inmates for convicted sex offenders, you have about 20%. 20% of male inmates are convicted sex offenders, and the numbers vary a little bit. Depends on, in some cases, what year the study is done, the definitions, if you're talking about provincial versus federal custody. But it's around, it's in that range. It's about 20%. For female offenders, it's much smaller, verging on non-existent, around 4%, maybe 6%. For trans-identified biologically male inmates seeking a transfer into a female institution, the number is 45%. So they are twice as likely, more than twice as likely as the average male inmate, and almost an order of magnitude beyond the average female inmate. And these are not COSBAR statistics that I'm giving you. A lot of this has been disclosed by the government. There's been analysis by academics, and it's been published. So we know these numbers. So the question is, I guess, from there, what is the reason for that? And there's, again, we're sort of I don't want to speculate too much. We've spoken with experts about this, and I can tell you the answer is complicated. One factor is that we believe that there are some inmates who are just simply taking advantage of the system to gain access to vulnerable women. We believe, and this is where it gets more controversial, is that there's some overlap in the psychology of someone who identifies as trans and the psychology of a person who goes on to commit sexual offenses. And there may be other factors as well. So how did we get here? I want to tell you a little bit about the history, and I want to draw a line in 2017, which you may know. The Government of Canada passed a bill called Bill C-16. So that amended human rights legislation, federal human rights legislation, to include protections based on gender identity and gender expression. So shortly after that, Correctional Services Canada's governing legislation was also amended, basically in the same way, and they pass what's called an interim policy bulletin. It basically tells correctional officers what to do, and that is the first time that we see this placement and transfer criteria that's not based on biological sex, but is based on gender identity. And the caveat, I suppose, or the only safeguard, is that there has to be a transfer will not occur unless there are overriding health and safety concerns. So it sort of puts the onus back on the government to say, well, in this case, it's sort of too far. And we know that it's not, I don't want to paint too bleak a picture in the sense that not every transfer request is granted. Some are denied. But we know that certainly enough are granted to the point where, again, these serious harms are occurring. So that's post 2017. What was the world like before that? And what position did the government take? And we know that for a long time, pre-operative individuals were permitted transfer into female institutions, even before 2017. This was very, very rare from what we figured out. Part of it, and I'm speculating a little bit, is that the number of people identifying as trans was just not as high in, say, 2001 as it is today. So you did not have as many inmates transferred. But you did see inmates transferred, and you saw applications. And what happened back in 2001 is that an inmate named Cynthia Kavanaugh sought a transfer into a female institution. This person was denied the transfer. They had not had the operation yet. And Cynthia Kavanaugh brought a claim to the Human Rights Tribunal, the federal Human Rights Tribunal. And the government of Canada at that time, back in 2001, they defended their decision, as you'd expect. And not only did they defend it, but they actually they led expert evidence. And they had 2 forensic psychiatrists, and I believe a psychologist as well, who all gave evidence about the dangers to female inmates were Cynthia Kavanaugh to be transferred into a female institution. And the federal Human Rights Tribunal, they agreed. And they said, no, we're not transferring. It went up to the federal court, and the federal court denied the appeal and said, no. And that was the policy at the time, that there were no essentially pre-operative trans inmates permitted transfer into a female institution. And even where they had the operation, that was quite rare. So I told you about that interim policy bulletin. That was eventually it's interim, so it didn't last forever. It was replaced by what's called CD 100, or Commissioner's Directive 100. And Commissioner's Directive 100 is essentially the same. It lays out a lot of the procedure in terms of how the transfer will occur, but it defines sex, and it does differentiate, sort of, between biological sex and stated gender. But the way that it defines sex is with reference to current genitalia, is what they say, which I don't know what it is. It sounds like the most sexist thing ever, that a woman, by that definition, is a person without a penis. So this is what CD 100 says, and it doesn't say that explicitly, but that's the extension of that it's in reference to current genitalia. So there was a case in the news recently, had to do with an inmate called Amanda Cooper. And this was a person who, and I only know what there's one published decision on this case, and I only know what I've read in that decision and heard in the news. But Amanda Cooper was, by all accounts I've read, convicted of a number of violent crimes involving women, including an assault in relation to a female correctional officer while in a women's institution. And this Amanda Cooper was denied the transfer. She made a complaint to the Human Rights Tribunal, and it went to the federal court. It was a judicial review, and her lawyers had actually read CD 100. It turns out that I'm not the only person who's read it, and they said, no, it's the you have to look at the definition of sex, and Amanda Cooper has had the operation. So Amanda Cooper is a female, and this is what their lawyers said, is the government does not get to consider past criminal history, propensity of violence, psychological assessment. All of that goes out the window because Amanda Cooper is, by the definition of CD 100, a woman, a female. And my understanding where that case is at is that Amanda Cooper brought a motion for an injunction, which is a form of relief where the court would, in theory, compel the government to do or not do something, and they wanted Amanda Cooper immediately transferred into a female institution. And that was denied. They didn't really deal with the argument that I was just laying out, that Amanda Cooper is, by that definition, a woman. And I really just say this to illustrate how perverse a lot of this is. It's not just sort of the facts and the harm that we know is happening, but it's also just what I would say is the poorly thought out nature of Commissioner's Directive 100 and the policy itself. So where are we at with it? We launched the lawsuit, it's over a year ago now. Unfortunately, these things take a lot of time. We just argued 2 preliminary motions in the federal court back in March, and we're waiting on decisions on those. What happened was the federal government told us, you haven't provided enough, it's a legal term, particulars, and it basically means who, what, when did this all happen? You say that a sexual assault or an assault or harassment happened. When did they happen, to whom, and so forth. So we sent them, I think it was something like 17 pages, single-spaced, of this is what we know, and these are all the people, and this is when it happened, by whom, and some of it is unknown to us, but we knew a fair bit. And we sent them that, and they still brought their motion to strike. And in any event, I'm being waved off the stage, but we're very optimistic based on the reception we've had, particularly publicly. We've had a number of people reach out to us who are potential witnesses, and I'm very hopeful for this case going forward. In my mind, it's, again, one of the most important legal cases going on right now.
Just a quick little piece of housekeeping before we bring Kelly Lynn Piri up here. We do have a team, a camera crew here doing a documentary on the event. They've been with us all day. And I'm told they might like to get some reactions from the audience. So this camera over here might pan across this quarter of the room over here. If anybody has a problem being on camera or they don't want their face being recorded, something like that, then by all means, feel free to
move somewhere where you won't be seen. Thanks.
Just give me a second here. Hi, I'm Kelly Lynn Peary. I am a detransitioner, and I am the founder of Detrans Alliance Canada. I was born in December of 1966, a girl, and the youngest of my mother's 6 children. Before I was 3 years old, my parents divorced, and my mom got remarried to a convicted pedophile. Mom knew what her new husband was doing to her children and refused to leave him. Although I grew up attending various Christian churches, walking with Christ was never modeled by the adults in my life. The household I lived in until I was 13 was a chaotic mix of drugs, alcohol, and abuse. It left me with deep spiritual wounds that marred my understanding of who God is and who He created me to be. In that just give me a sec. In that environment, I developed false beliefs, including that I would have been safer if I had been born a boy. I saw other girls being abused, but not other little boys, not as extensively. Children are amazing at observing the world around them. However, they are extremely poor at interpreting the meaning of the events they observe. At 13, I turned the pedophile into the police, and he eventually went to jail. Although I became a Christian in my late teens, in 1989, I chose to pursue drugs, alcohol, and sexual relationships. During those years I spent in apostasy, John chapter 1 haunted me. I could not shake my belief that I was a created being. Drugs and alcohol were a monkey on my back that seemed to take all the awkward away. In 2001, and stark raving sober, the walls began to fall down. I have been sober since May 28th, 2002. I knew I needed God to maintain my sobriety. However, I did not want so much God in my life that He would change me. During my early sobriety, I thought, Jesus and I were okay, but I don't think His people would ever want anything to do with me. Lacking both the moral compass of belonging to the body of Christ and any awareness of my body as a temple of the Holy Spirit, in 2004, I became completely enthralled with the trans delusion. I had spent a year in inpatient alcohol and drug recovery for women, and I reached a point of just being exhausted from therapy. And I believed the instant fix, that living my life as a man would fix all my emotional brokenness and spiritual problems. I spent 17 years in the trans delusion. Several of those years I spent in trans activism, during which WPATH, which Mia talked about, through its sub-path organizations in Canada, that's CPATH, or Canadian Professional Association of Trans Health. They organized a letter writing campaign to the university research ethics committees to please refrain from engaging in research that would only serve to further pathologize and stigmatize an already marginalized and vulnerable population. We didn't care what the research was saying. We just didn't want it replicated. We wanted them to stop researching the devastating health outcomes of these surgeries and of cross-sex hormones. When I entered the trans delusion in 2004, I was exposed to adult pornography via Vancouver's BDSM subculture, which was a huge part of what the trans community was involved in, and I was expected to be part of a trans support network. It took me a long time to realize that real love does not harm, distort, or demand. It reflects the love of Christ. I came to regret sacrificing my physical health and bodily organs to gender ideology on Sunday, September 2nd, 2009. I was attending the Vancouver Pride Parade, and I had like a beard, and all of these men were suddenly flirting with me and indicating sexual interest. And I realized that everything I had done to disappear from the sexual gaze of men, I had just become visible to a different group of males. And it was a hard moment in my life. I had begun taking wrong sex hormones in 2005. When I asked the endocrinologist at that time about the risks of taking testosterone, he told me I would face the same health risks as any other male. That information is wrong. I now live with type 2 diabetes. Liver cancer is also another risk that women face that's never talked about, and serious cognitive fog. As part of my quest to become a real man, I also underwent a hysterectomy and a bilateral mastectomy. When I finally recognized that nothing I had done to alter my physical appearance had fixed my fears or my trauma, I left Vancouver and went long haul trucking. One of the hardest parts of living today beyond the trans delusion was learning how to navigate the male-female social interactions, because I didn't learn how to do that as a child. I was introduced to drugs. I knew how to smoke marijuana by the time I was 5, and drugs and alcohol were just part of what the pedophile introduced into my world. And then as a teenager, I began to seek them out myself. So when I got sober, I had never learned how to socialize without alcohol or some other substance to lubricate and smooth over those events. So part of the discomfort I was feeling was just not knowing how to be around other people. I fled the presence of God until I ran out of running. My Christian family had been praying for me for decades, and it wasn't until my favorite brother had a crisis, and I phoned a family member to ask them to please pray for him. And they said, "No, but we'll listen, will you pray?" And since that moment, God has slowly fanned back into my life a desire to return to Him for comfort. By 2022, I had a desperate willingness to just find some way out, because I believe the lie that having taken testosterone, I could never look like a woman again. And in the trans subculture, we're told that only people who are completely insane would ever regret doing this, and that the best I would ever do is look like a trans woman. And how could I dare enter women's spaces looking like that? It's a lot of contradictions. When I left long haul trucking, I no longer wanted to live in the lie of the trans delusion, but I felt trapped in it. Eventually, I started going back to church again. And one day I confessed to my minister that I had been born a girl. And he responded with compassion, affirming that Jesus changes lives, and asked how to support me in my walk with Christ. Our monthly meetings focused on my relationship with Christ and the Bible. Although I honestly doubted that reading the Bible would help, it changed everything. Over time, I stopped taking testosterone, I shaved off my beard, I found the courage to start taking estrogen replacement therapy, I got baptized, I applied for seminary. In January 2025, I began my studies to a master's degree in divinity. Early in my Early in my detransition journey, I founded a grassroots organization called Detrans Alliance Canada. Its growth has been slow and steady. And over the past 2 years, I sensed God guiding me to make myself redundant to its long-term sustainability so that hopefully it will continue on. Like so many organizations for detransitioners have started up, and then when the person who was organizing it or starting it no longer had the energy to carry on in activism, the organization closed down when they left. And I want Detrans Alliance Canada to continue on after I'm gone. So we're seeking to mentor and train up a younger generation of detransitioners to carry this work forward. Within the overlapping social circles that I inhabit, I hope to be remembered as someone who remained insistent and consistent in encouraging Christians, pastors, and minister leaders to resist the temptation to offer oversimplistic answers to the deeply personal struggles of trans queer identified people. Oversimplistic, ideologically driven narratives often further to fracture rather than to heal already fragile and fragmented identities. I was blessed to experience a pastoral care response that took seriously the complexities of gender and sexual brokenness without compromising the gospel. This helped a wounded person like me to navigate towards a more mature, enduring, and trusting relationship with God. My vision for Detrans Alliance Canada is to intentionally cultivate an atmosphere where people who are different feel safe sharing their struggle, while also being supported in their spiritual formation as they navigate out of gender dysphoria towards anchoring their identity within the reality of their embodiment. Within this community, I hope to have contributed to a pastoral response that encourages people who have invested their identity in their brokenness to explore the muddy, messy ambiguities of life in a manner that helps them to move forward and reconcile with God, reality, and the embodiment of their existence. This involves walking alongside trans queer people as they journey from a fragmented, self-determined identity towards understanding that their personhood is determined in whose they are because they are children of God. My vision is that the church becomes a place where people learn to answer the question, who you are, who are you, with I am a child of God. As a detransitioner, I care deeply about the health and well-being of gender nonconforming, confused, and questioning youth. I thank Jeff Evely for putting on this event. I am no longer a victim. I am a survivor. The child I was endured, the woman I am remains. In Christ, I am victorious. Yes, there are still days when I am tired or scared and sometimes completely overwhelmed. And in those moments, I find him and I choose him, and he gives me comfort. And I choose to love and laugh and smile and cry. And my testimony is a love story, and it is a complicated mess full of laughter and tears and melancholy and joy. But Christ has brought me through this. He is my answer to why this, why am I here, and why life. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, my friend. Love you, Kelly Lynn. I'm Dr. Ann Gillies. I'm a trauma therapist, specialized in chronic childhood abuse and attachment issues with children. But my first love is Jesus Christ. And because of that, I love truth. I am passionate for truth. And I am so excited to see all of these people here tonight. You have no idea what this does for my heart. It's been many years coming to Ottawa, and I've met many of you before tonight. Thank God for you. And thank God that you continue to fight for truth in our land. I'm going to talk about the cost of affirmation. We're living in a moment that will define a generation because of what we are doing to our children. We're witnessing one of the most profound social experiments, and my friend Mia talked about that. Awesome job. Most profound social experiment in modern history, and it's being carried out on the most vulnerable among us, our children. There's no objective test, no scan, no blood work to determine that a child is in the wrong body. What we're dealing with is distress, confusion, and identity struggle of teenagers and those younger. And yet we're treating these individuals, these young people, with irreversible medical intervention. Believing in your child isn't the same as agreeing with erroneous thinking or behavior. So let's differentiate that. You can believe in your child, but you don't have to agree. What parent ever agreed with everything their child did or said? Hello. But today, we are reversing what for decades clinicians actually supported, which was watchful waiting. They supported the child and they supported the family because the whole family is involved when the child is experiencing dysphoria or distress. And so they work through the underlying issues. Today, that model's gone. And prior to 2013, the percentage of adults who transition, and it was called transsexual, or there was such a small percentage, 0.0414% of natal males and 0.003% of natal females ever became adult transsexuals. And yet, what we never hear now is that between 70 and 97% of natal males and 50 to 88% of natal females reconciled their biological sex by puberty with watchful waiting. With watchful waiting and good psychological care. The vast majority of these children never reverted to their ideology, but they consistently went back to their biological reality. So instead of patience, now we rush children through. Instead of therapy, we affirm. Instead of caution, we medicalize. And this yellow brick road leads all who follow it to an ultimate destination of lifelong medicalization, which is what you've heard already. There's no Emerald City, only confusion, pain, and often deep regret. In 2014, gender dysphoria, the prevalence rate was 0.06%. And yet in 2020 to 2021, there was actually a 70% increase in diagnoses. Now as many, hear this, now as many as 1 in 100 children identify as trans. This is a contagion, a social contagion. It's not about biology. It's not science. Our children have been shaped by public education, media, social media, and culture rather than their own parents. It has brought together a whole demoralization and a deconstruction of the family unit. Words are weaponized to conform to dangerous ideologies. Transing of children is not progressive. It's politically motivated, it's medically dangerous, and it's abusive. They are told sexual identity is fluid, identity is self-created. They aren't born with an identity, they self-create their identity. And biology is irrelevant. The data shows that children are struggling deeply, and these children struggle deeply. Children with gender dysphoria present in the context of multiple interacting risk factors. Gender dysphoria is a symptom, it's a state of mind. The majority have pre-existing mental health issues and concerns. This is not identity discovery, it's psychological distress that has been going untreated because we as a society, medical societies, psychological associations chose to instead use affirmation-only therapy, and Bill C-4 prevents anyone in these professions from actually treating these children, adolescents, and adults according to their need. Affirming care is a pipeline: social transitioning, puberty blockers, hormones, and then surgery. We affirm them right into bodily mutilation in an attempt to overcome thoughts and the feelings that they are experiencing. The consequences, though, are lifelong. You've already talked about that, Kelly Lynn. Cognitive interruptions caused by puberty blockers, sterility, irreversibility, loss of function, sexual function, medical dependence, and often, most often, regret. When a child says, "I hate my body," do we remove the child's parts? That's what Canadians and Canadian doctors have been doing. Or do we help them understand their body? This is about protecting children. They deserve truth, they deserve care, and they deserve adults who will contend for truth with courage to protect the children of this country. We must stand firm to provide the lifeline our children need to survive this cultural and sexual misappropriation and to thrive in adulthood, not to spend adulthood in hospitals, wounded and sick. It's time to present the unaltered truth and stop the tidal wave of children being bulldozed into the medicalization conveyor belt. So here's my phrase to you. I hope you take it home with you. Stand firm, walk cautiously, and live courageously on behalf of the children of this country. Thank you. Just before I give this mic over to Barry, I have 2 books. I'm not trying to sell books particularly, but if you want information that's fairly easy to read on gender-affirming care, this one is called Ultimate Deception. And this is a children's book that really should be in every school instead of what they are showing our children. It's the actual trajectory into transing. And anyways, just if you're interested.
Well, I've heard it said that the mind can absorb only what the butt can endure. So I think I'd like everybody to get up on their feet and shake hands with somebody you haven't met before. Come on, Ann and Kelly, you've met before. Okay, folks, you're cutting into my 15 minutes. You know, when I first heard about the concept that children might be born in the wrong body, and that a boy could change into a girl and a girl could change into a boy, my immediate reaction was not religious, although I'm a man of faith. But my specialty had been dealing with sex offenders. And, you know, I met a lot of married sex offenders, and I could not get over their wives were just like Kelly's mom. They knew that they're usually a stepfather or a live-in common law boyfriend. They knew what he was doing to their kids, and they stuck up for him and encouraged him. And this whole concept of being born in the wrong body just reminded me so much of these families that were so sexually dysfunctional. Um, I began my career as a probation officer in the little community of Creston, which is just north of the Idaho Panhandle, and we had a large colony there of polygamous Mormons. Winston Blackmore has as many as 30 wives. I was in Dalman Oler's home. He had 5 wives. His youngest wife was 17. His oldest wife was 56. And he had 57 children. And you can imagine all the incest nonsense that went on there. But the topic of my study is what it cost me personally, because I am so convinced that childhood transition harms children. And people that wouldn't agree with me, I just dismiss them as ignoring the facts. But here's some of the things that it cost me. I had the joy and pleasure of being a charter member of a new mission in our church, building a little congregation in the community of Chilliwack. But the young pastor was he had a job as a museum director, and he had 3 lesbians on his staff. This is another thing that puzzles me, why they think that transing children has anything to do with the lesbian gay movement. But anyways, they got after him and said, "How can you have such a hateful bigot in your church?" And they kept giving him such a bad time that before he quit, he asked me to leave his church, a church that I had helped to found. Another reason was his wife was a public health nurse, and public health is totally bought into this transing nonsense. And she was very critical of me too. And I had another friend. He was my best friend in high school. He went on to become a school teacher and a union activist in the central Okanagan, and he turned on me viciously as well. So I've lost a lot of friends over this, and that hurts. But I'm still convinced that probably the worst enemies that we have in trying to turn back this flood of nonsense is cowardice. And when you look up cowardice in the holy book of the Lord, cowardice is considered to be one of the worst sins. It's worse than sexual immorality, than stealing, than violence. Cowardice, people who are cowards will not get into heaven. And I've just been overwhelmed by people who claim to be of faith, and yet they're too cowardly to take a stand and stand for truth. You've all heard that I was recently given a $750,000 fine. This is the 4th legal case that I've been involved with. And the reason I came to Ottawa is I wanted to publicly out Injustice Wagner. I I had worked with special needs kids all my life. I had a special needs daughter myself. I helped to set up a school for the deaf to benefit her and other profoundly deaf students. And the president of the union said I wasn't fit to be around children. Well, that was an insult too far. So I sued him for defamation. He had lots of money, and we appeared before a Supreme Court judge in Vancouver. And incidentally, Justin Trudeau had just appointed him. And he had never heard a defamation case before, and this was complicated. And he said it was okay for Hansman to insult Neufeld because Hansman knew what he was doing and Neufeld didn't. We went to the BC Court of Appeals, and I won at that level. But Hansman had lots of money. The union had lots of money. Went all the way to the Supreme Court in Ottawa. Some of you were at a rally just outside the Supreme Court. I think it was 3 years ago. And there were 7 of the 9 judges were there. And Judge Wagner, I could tell that he wasn't even listening to the arguments. I showed up with 1 lawyer, and Hansman showed up with 14 lawyers. And they were arguing for various LGBTQ societies that are being funded by taxpayers' money. And in the end, the justices decided that Hansman was entitled to criticize me publicly because he was protecting a very vulnerable group of children. No, he wasn't. I was. And final thing I want to say about Judge Wagner, as you know, he will not recuse himself from hearing this appeal about the truckers' protests, even though during the protests he said horrible things about them. And he's had the absolute audacity to have a bronze bust of himself made and set in the Supreme Court, and he's not even dead yet. Maybe that's my wishful thinking. But anyways, my hope and prayer is that people of faith will get some backbone and stand up against this nonsense, which is not only ruining kids' lives, it's tearing families. I've seen it tear families apart. I've seen it cause divorces. I've seen it tear extended families apart. And it's not a minor movement. It is growing exponentially. Thank you for your attention.
Hello, everybody. I'm a last-minute addition. My name is Athena Davis. Sorry. Hi, Caroline. I'm a coordinator of a parent support group in Montreal for the province of Quebec. I also work with GenSpec, with Mia and Caroline, and I'm a member of the LGB Alliance. I'm here to tell you a real-life story of Gabrielle, who is a young Quebec woman who could not be here today. So, as a teen, Gabrielle hated her body. Also, she fell madly in love with a girl who asked that she become a boy. At 15 years old, Gabrielle went to the Meraki Health Center in Montreal, headed by a couple of trans activist doctors, where in 30 minutes, she was diagnosed with gender dysphoria and given a prescription for blockers, even though the doctors were told of her autism and of the demands of her girlfriend. Gabrielle now describes the relationship as toxic. 3 months later, there was a second 30-minute appointment where she got a prescription for testosterone this time and a letter of referral, sorry, I'm francophone, for surgery. The letter said, Gabe was also followed for his emotions, and the development of his gender identity by members of our psychosocial team. After many in-depth discussions with Gabe, our team recommended that he start taking sex hormones. This was totally untrue. 2 30-minute appointments. This letter also led her to an operating table at 16, and she lost her breasts. Those are her words. She told me, "We are told the process is careful, long, and complex, but this is totally wrong." Even though she voiced numerous complaints about the effects of testosterone and her anxiety levels were on the rise, to the point of getting now anxiety attacks, the medical teams never reconsidered the treatment they proposed, only saying he would get better with time. After losing her breasts, she had an hysterectomy at 20, losing her womb. At 25, Gabriel says she hates her body, is truly dysphoric, has gone through premenopause and menopause. When she realized her doctors pretended they had given her support, she was very angry and also immensely sad. Now she needs help. There is none available. She is told reconstruction surgery is purely aesthetic. The medical world is letting her down. Worse still, some want to hide the truth. There's a film showing the reality of kids being fast-tracked to transition and the impossibility to criticize the affirming model in Quebec. The film is called Generation Trans. It was supposed to be shown in Quebec City a few days ago. The cinema got threats, and the screening was canceled. People pretend that questioning is transphobic. Gabriel told me she is not transphobic. She says she knows people who seem to be happy with their transition. It might be a solution for some. She does not claim to be a specialist, but she wants to denounce the lack of psychological help for distressed minors and the speed of the medicalization process. She asks for psychological help for everyone. She asks for time before any irreversible steps are taken, the time she did not get. Gabriel is asking the adults to protect teenagers, to make sure no other confused and distressed teen is pushed to irreversible damage. Now that's Gabriel's story. I'm going to take 2 minutes more to tell you about, I talked to you about the Meraki Health Center, where Gabriel went. Let me briefly tell you about Dr. Shadi, Nicolas Shadi, a pediatrician, co-head of St. Justice Gender Clinic for Children in Montreal. Shadi is soft-spoken, looks like a kind man, his voice is gentle, he sounds very concerned about the well-being of all the young people he meets. And normally, in medicine, as Mia said, you follow the evidence wherever it leads. But even though Dr. Shadi claims to be a researcher, his philosophy is to follow the child, wherever this will lead. Now, he gave an interview a few days ago, that's why I want to tell you about him, during which he explains that children will choose different paths in and out of transition, and all is good. Some might choose medicalization, others not. Some might change their minds, perceptions as they age. In 2023, he gave a conference and freely admitted that some teens might change their minds about being trans. Now, notice that this is a new strategy by the trans-affirming health professionals. At first, they denied detransition existed, regrets existed. They said it was like 1%, something like that. But now they cannot deny it anymore. So now their new strategy is, we will say, we're letting the child lead the process. And by letting the child lead, he, Dr. Shadi, and all the other gender doctors are putting all the responsibility on the shoulders of the child or the teen. He will not ever evaluate whether the gender identity could be a passing phase, a maladaptive coping mechanism, a response to trauma. No, gender doctors refuse to do this out of the kindness of their hearts. Now, we hear from grieving parents in all the parent supports group, and answering a question about grieving parents, and if there's any parents in a room, you're going to be really pissed. Shadi turns poetic. He said, nobody dies. It is a luminous process, a beautiful process. Parents only grieve their perceptions, ideas, expectations for their children, obviously. And in return, they will receive joy, potential, and light. I'm not making up those words. I'm just translating them from the French. Those are his words. He sounds like a zealot. We are really struck by this missionary zeal to help trans kids. So in our opinion, they are absolute dangers to children, to creative kids, bullied kids, gay kids, gender non-conforming kids, autistic kids, scared of pubertal changes kids, depressed and anxious kids are kids. And even though Chadi's clinic has already treated more than 1,000 children in Quebec, he just obtained funding from a pediatric research foundation to follow new patients in a longitudinal study for the next 25 years. And his team starting recruiting new children in 2025. He said in the interview that he's still young enough to do such a long-term study and admits this will be career defining. This is his life project. So why is he not already studying the long-term effects of the lives of kids already transitions? No idea. He claims European studies are not pertinent to his field because, the care is not organized in the same way as in Quebec. These doctors need to be stopped. They will never take the responsibility for what they have done, since they will claim the patients decided and led the way the whole time. They were just the facilitators and helpers trying to alleviate pain and suffering as demanded. They need to be stopped. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you very much for having us and for listening. It's quite rare in this country at the moment. My name is Faith Grollo. I was transitioned as a minor. I was about 15 when it started socially, 16 when I started puberty blockers. I was about 17 when they started the process to have me approved for top surgery. I hadn't even gotten testosterone yet. My 18th birthday is when I received the letter of approval that OHIP would have my breasts removed. And then October 25th, so my birthday is October 11th, so later in the birth month, I ended up starting testosterone. When I had all of these done, I was an extremely distressed and mentally broken child. My brain had split because of the trauma I had gone through as a child. I was diagnosed at 15 with dissociative identity disorder. I had post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, and anxiety, all diagnosed by a psychiatrist after months and years of psychotherapy. I was dealing with professionals for my psychiatric problems. I was also born with a birth defect. It's called a diaphragmatic hernia. It's a hole in your diaphragm muscle. It's very important for breathing. When that happened, because of the actual birth process, a lot of my intestines went up into my chest wall. My left lung was collapsed. It was the size of a peanut, and the other one was still slightly underdeveloped. The doctors didn't really know what to do with me. My mom and I were very fortunate to have a nurse in the hospital room who had actually seen a baby already with that disorder. So she understood what was happening and knew exactly who to call so that I was able to be revived. But the fact was I died. I was stillborn. I clinically died several times as they were trying to save me. And this happened at McMaster Children's Hospital. Had I been born anywhere else, I probably would have stayed dead. 15, 16 years later, I'm brought to the same hospital that refuses to acknowledge the physical complication that came of my birth defect. They refused to acknowledge the other prior mental health diagnoses that I had. They simply fast-tracked me onto transition because they believed that my suicidal ideation was based on the fact that I was gender nonconforming, gender dysphoric. It was not. I was suicidal and hated my body and myself because of what had been done to me. Because of the birth defect, I had a reparative surgery at 4 days old. They had me in a medically induced coma for the first 6 days of my life. I was in the hospital for 6 weeks. Eventually, I was cleared. I went home. And then there was abuse at the age of 2 that was violent enough to break my left collarbone. And it also reopened that hole in my diaphragm. That collarbone was x-rayed. It took them a couple days and 2 x-rays to be able to identify it, but it was broken. What they neglected to identify was that that trauma also caused a third of my large intestine to go up in my chest wall through the hole that had been re-pierced, and that remained collapsing my left lung for 18 years. The medical society, the same hospital that I was born at, that knew I had this birth defect, neglected to ever look into the complication that I repeatedly complained about. I would go to hospitals over my life from the age of 6 onward. I would go to the emergency room, complain of pain. I would even tell them at age 6, I was born with a diaphragmatic hernia. I believe the patch ripped off. Could you fix it? They would take an x-ray, say the patch is still there, you should be fine, we don't know why you're in pain, take some Tylenol and go home. This was all through several different cities, several different emergency rooms, but going back to the hospital that could save me when I was born, that knew I had this defect, they neglected to find it. Instead, they fast-tracked me onto transition. They never knew I had that collapsed lung. In fact, in my medical records, the endocrinologist who prescribed my medication, he wrote in his notes that he heard, quote, good breath lungs on both sides bilaterally, end quote, which is, I'd like to know what breath sounds he was hearing on the left side of my chest when my lung was collapsed. And then later on, after I had reparative surgery again at 23, and in doing that, I ended up having, I got sick a little bit, but they were able to get my lung working. And so it could actually breathe and inflate completely on its own, even after being collapsed for as long as it was. And I ended up getting sick. And so I had to go to the doctor. They were listening to my lungs. And I said, I was diagnosed with asthma. And so I thought being sick, I would come in and get a puffer because I probably have a different dosage now because I've got a working lung again. And so the doctor was listening and he's like, I don't actually hear a trace of asthma in your lungs. You breathe fine. So I probably never had asthma. It was just the fact that my lung was collapsed. I couldn't breathe properly, and that was the easiest diagnosis instead of looking into my medical history. So that was the build-up, essentially, to me being transitioned. I was extremely mentally distressed. I didn't remember all of my appointments I had alone with the pediatrician who transitioned me and diagnosed me because I had amnesia. There were appointments almost exclusively. All of the appointments were without my mother. My father was not in the home by the time I was 12. He had left. And so when I was being transitioned, my mother was extremely vulnerable. She was a very religious woman, came from a very religious home. She tried to raise me in the faith, but because of the trauma, that was very difficult for me as a kid to understand because a lot of people around me didn't know what was happening. And so they didn't know how to help me spiritually through that. And so a lot of the things I understood about Christianity when I was young were incorrect, and they were flawed by human interpretation, certainly not by God. My Creator created me precisely how I was supposed to be. When I was born, there were actually several other children around the same time born with the same defect I had, and all of them died. A couple of them were boys, and statistics actually say that women, because biologically we are designed to carry children, our bodies are designed to stretch. If I had been born a male, I most certainly would have stayed dead. But because my body was designed to carry life, it was able to adapt and change and grow around this defect. I was able to function even with one collapsed lung, and a diaphragm that didn't work properly. I was still required to participate in school class, in gym, like the other kids, because nobody knew I was disabled. The psychological torture that does, because it's excruciating. It would go up as food would pass, right? Because it's an intestine. As food would pass through, it would have to shift my rib cage and the diaphragm away from the natural position, go in, and then a couple hours later it would have to go out. And so my body would be in pain for several hours as I was trying to just perform normal bodily duties. Then when I went into emergency room claiming I was suicidal because I hadn't been able to see my therapist at the time because it was around the holidays, there just wasn't enough time and I was just extra distressed around the holidays that time around. My mom had taken me to my local emergency room before, and they had specifically told her if she ever comes here again with these types of issues, mental health issues, bring her anywhere else. Do not bring her here because we do not have the resources for youth mental health. And so my mother was told to take me literally anywhere. So she did what she only thought was logical and took me to the hospital that initially saved my life when I was born. By the time I had gotten there, they had completely overhauled the hospital, and these doctors had no idea what they were doing. The pediatrician who decided to diagnose me after I was transferred to the gender clinic because of my suicidal ideation in the emergency room, the pediatrician started assessing, you could say. She would ask questions, but they were very surface level. How do you feel? What do you feel? Things like that, but never why do you feel it? Do you want kids? No. Never why don't you want kids? Just do you? No? Okay. I was never offered fertility preservation options because I stated I did not want kids because I was 16, because I had been abused, and because I thought I would hurt them. I didn't know how to protect my children in a world that I was already hurt in. Of course I didn't want them. I didn't want to hurt them. I didn't want to bring them into something I knew had already broken me and didn't know how to fix me. So I thought that would be cruel. And I was perfectly fine to be sterilized when I was 16. And then I ended up I was given puberty blockers, testosterone. I was approved for the top surgery, but I ended up not going through with it. I actually let the approval expire because I decided on my own that I had other priorities than cutting off otherwise healthy body parts. I actually made the decision on my own. Later on, I had a psychotherapist after I aged out of the youth gender clinic. And so I was able to work through a lot of the trauma I had experienced that got me there without it being gender-based. And so I could find interests that actually were helpful, that made me not want to kill myself, and made life actually worth living without worrying about what gender I identified as. And so that whole process made it very easy for me to cope with what life had done to me, what it had given me, what I had chosen to do with myself, and move forward in, if I chose to be trans later, like I opted basically, I'll just live androgynous, I'll still bind my chest, I'll still maybe take testosterone, but the surgeries could wait until after childbearing years. If I still, after 30, 50, if I still didn't have kids by then and I still wanted to do these things to my body, great, because at least maybe I wouldn't hurt the kids I might later choose to have. And there was a point during the transition, there was a nurse who was doing my injections, and she wasn't actually connected to the gender clinic. She was a different family practice, like my own family doctor through their clinic. And so she was doing the Lupron injections, which are the puberty blockers. She was doing the testosterone injections and showing me how to inject myself. There was a point I ended up on birth control. It was progesterone based, so it didn't have any estrogen. And so in my teenage brain, I thought, oh, well, that would basically do the same thing as the puberty blocker. It will stop the period, lower the estrogen, only give you progesterone, and it won't counteract with the testosterone. So I asked this injection nurse, could I stop taking the puberty blocker and just have the birth control and continue the testosterone. And she smiled at me and she said, I don't know. Because I asked if it worked the same way. And the lady giving me these medications didn't know how they worked. She didn't know if they worked the same. So she let me essentially just choose my own treatment. It was a choose your own adventure. That was what it was. The doctors did not guide anything. The doctors supplied drugs. They supplied surgeries. They supplied a name change, and they supplied parenting techniques. They taught me how to manipulate my mother when I went home, because I could tell her, the doctor says I'm going to kill myself if you don't let me transition. So you have to. I'll die otherwise. The doctors never offered less invasive options. They simply said, transition your child or you'll have a dead daughter. Those were her options. And my mother, being a very religious woman, loved me, and loved me so much that she turned her back on her own God. She turned her back on her own values, and she stopped fighting the doctors because they said that this was going to save me and keep me alive. And that's all she wanted. She wanted her child to be alive and happy. And these doctors lied to her. They lied to me, and they said that these treatments would do precisely that, and they didn't. I am what they want to try and convince people is a trans child. I was never a trans child. I was a broken and abused child, and I was lost. I was terrified in a world that I didn't know how to navigate, with adults who didn't know how to protect me, and another set of adults with white coats who were perfectly willing to hurt me. One of the main concepts that I really started to understand as I got older was that the doctors like to claim that they receive informed consent, specifically fully informed consent. This is impossible. You cannot receive informed consent from a child. You also cannot receive informed consent if you do not give the full information accurately. I signed up for something that was misadvertised. It was wrong. The way that it happened was not how they described it. Absolutely, it was fraud. Absolutely fraud. The main other concept that I came to was also the same system that had been able to fast track a treatment for a disorder that I never had also overlooked very real, present, and documented mental and physical health issues. They were completely overlooked, and I was treated as if I did not have them. The pediatrician overrode the psychiatric diagnoses I had and said because she did not see any of my psychiatric symptoms in her own meetings with me, she treated me as if I did not have them. So that is the due diligence of the doctors. They don't do any. It's their own perceptions of whatever information a child gives them. The other thing as well, just in terms of a timeline, I was trans-identified from 15 socially onwards until I was about 22. I stopped medications, but I still lived as a trans man. I thought I was still happy. And then in March 2024, when the WPATH files came out and I really understood right from the top down, they have no idea what they're doing and they did not follow their own guidelines with me, I realized my doctors were wrong and I was never trans to begin with. So once I realized that, I submitted a complaint with the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario. They decided to take no further action because the doctors essentially answered that they didn't do anything wrong, they followed protocols, it was fine. So I appealed that decision with the health committee. I'm still awaiting their decision, but during that meeting was actually where it was clarified for me that no, it wasn't that the pediatrician did not know that I had these psychiatric disorders. She knew. They were in my medical records, and they were diagnosed a year prior. She was perfectly aware of them. She chose to override the diagnoses and treat me as if I did not have them. These were her defense lawyer's words to defend her. So I am still waiting for the answer there. Unfortunately, the process is a little slow, but it is attempting to move. The other thing is, well, I did apply for disability because of my physical deformity. I had to get reparative surgery at 23, and I still got more hernias from that. So I do still have to deal with that, and disability actually rejected me and said that I don't have recurring disabilities. One thing I will also point out, we're not entirely sure, medically speaking, what actually caused it. I am under a strong belief it was probably the puberty blockers while I was in the middle of my puberty, or it was the testosterone. But while I was going through puberty was when they started messing with my hormones. And in trying to heal from the surgery, when they were looking at the hernias that came up, the ultrasound technician was trying to get kind of close to my ribs, and she actually pushed so hard. I'm not sure how many people are familiar with what ribs look like. You have a couple anchor points on your sternum, and you have several ribs that will go around, and multiple will attach to one anchor point. You have floating ribs right at the bottom across your back, and then you have what's called false ribs. So those are about 4 large ribs that connect from your spine, wrap around, and then connect at the single anchor point right at the bottom of your sternum on either side. When this ultrasound technician was attempting to get a better image of the hernias caused by the reparative surgery, she actually popped that anchor point off of my sternum, and it is still like that to this day because our healthcare system, which again was so perfectly fine to fast track me, has no idea what to do with me. So, all of this being said, now I still get to go into the same system that attempted to break me, advocate for myself, trying to do their jobs, so that I can help them actually help me. As a child, I went through things I didn't understand and I should never have needed to. And that is the instability that caused me to think changing my body would fix it. And then I had science, when I was struggling with my religion, my faith. Science told me they could fix me with surgery. And they couldn't. They couldn't, and now I still get to live with that. And so, very briefly, my goal is I want their licenses. These people who claim to be healing our children don't know what they're doing. They don't seem to understand what do no harm means anymore, and I am more than willing to show them what it means. Thank you so much. Thank you.
It's me again. So, as I mentioned previously, I'm a retired military guy. That means I like PowerPoints. So this is me. I was a single dad for the last 10 years of my career. I coached cheerleading, softball, taught my kids music and martial arts. And now, this is me. Lead marshal on the day for the Toronto 1 Million March for Children. I was a co-organizer nationally in 2023. In 2024, a couple of days after the 1 Million March for Children, I was at Billboard Chris and Save Canada event in Toronto, where we saw CUPE standing shoulder to shoulder with Antifa, and Fred Hahn, the president of Ontario CUPE, was right there with them, advocating for transing our kids. So I made it a sign, children used for pharma exploitation. And then I got it professionally made for the 2024 1 Million March for Children. So now I want to know, thank you. Now I want to know whether these pension funds are making money off of this. This is Socrates, father of philosophy and the Enlightenment. He basically gave us two things. Number one is a syllogism. It's the basic structure of a logical argument. And number two is a Socratic method. It's a means of interrogating claims by asking probing questions in order to ascertain their veracity, their truth. And basically what he did is he went around asking the experts, how do you know that? And for that, they executed him. This is Plato's Cave from Plato's Republic. In this story, Socrates narrates a situation where we have a group of prisoners inside a cave observing shadows on a wall, and they believe this to be the real world. One of these prisoners escapes. He goes outside, he sees the real light. He comes back into the cave to tell the others what you're observing on the cave wall is not reality. The real world is outside. And for that, they hate him and they want him dead. Here's a quote. My plainness of speech makes them hate me. And what is their hatred but a proof that I am speaking the truth? This is Dr. Maria Keeley, the Beast, endocrinologist at the Children's Hospital of Eastern Ontario. I saw her for 2 appointments where she wanted to give my daughter puberty blockers and testosterone. So I had some questions. I recorded them. Here it is.
I don't see any science behind any of this. And I keep asking for it, but I don't get it.
I don't think, the thing is, I don't think we're going to be able to mute genocide.
Well, you're wrong about that because I'm willing to change my mind. It's just that I need to see evidence.
I hear you, but we're not going to be able to give you the evidence that you want.
Because you don't have any. Is there any other medical intervention that you would pursue without evidence?
Yeah.
Like what?
Okay. I think, but I'm not going to keep going.
I'm just asking for an example.
No, I hear you.
I didn't give me the evidence, so I'll change my mind.
Okay, so you're getting slightly aggressive.
Yeah, that's because you're putting my child in danger with this recklessness.
Okay. We can go around in circles and keep going around in circles.
I'm not going in circles.
We're just trying to help.
I'm not going in circles. All I ask for is some kind of
We're not going to be able to give you that evidence.
So that's a very short excerpt of a much longer clip. I've posted it to all my socials. Jeff Evely on X, if you want to see more. I recorded 5 appointments. And in every single one of these appointments, these doctors browbeat me, they gaslit me, they flat out lied to me about the reversibility of puberty blockers and the long-term effects, or the lack thereof, according to them, of cross-sex hormones. This is Thomas Sowell. He's a retired economist from Stanford University. He says, when you want to help people, you tell them the truth. When you want to help yourself, you tell them what they want to hear. So, as has been mentioned on this stage already, this is a real barrier for us in Canada. Now, we've seen countries all over the world, the UK, the US, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, France, Italy, they're rolling this back. They're putting tighter restrictions on puberty blockers, all-out bans, cross-sex hormones, surgeries for minors. But Canada lags behind. Why? It's because of this bill, C4 on conversion therapy, unanimously consented by all 338 cowards in the House of Commons in 2021. Now, I've got a couple parts highlighted here. The really problematic section in this bill is actually the definition of conversion therapy. You can see on the screen that there are 6 criteria, any one of which you meet makes you guilty of conversion therapy, and it comes with a punishment of up to 5 years in prison, as it says on the bottom. I've highlighted the second one there because it says if you cause a cis-identified person if you cause a trans-identified person to become cis-identified, that's conversion therapy. So this is the barrier even for professionals, psychologists, counselors. They're not willing to provide talk therapy to change a person's mind in lieu of changing their body because of this bill. And I have had the experience of taking my daughter to a therapist to tell them that I want to give her counseling to alleviate her distress. But as soon as she identifies as trans, she says, "I'm sorry, I can't help you. All I can do is refer you to the gender clinic." This is the excerpt from the conservative, the CPC conference in early 2026. This was the motion before the conference. It says, "We believe that parents have the right to arrange for body-affirming talk therapy for their gender-confused child, and we oppose the federal conversion therapy ban, which criminalizes parents for doing so." Now, that motion failed by a narrow margin. Only 51.85% of the convention thought that parents have the right to pursue talk therapy for their gender-stressed child. Now, that's a slight majority, but they need a supermajority, which means a majority of the provinces and territories as well. They didn't get that, so the motion failed. They're not going to pursue a repeal of Bill C-4 as a result. And I don't mean to politicize this issue, but this is a political problem, and it has a political solution. Yeah. This is an email that I sent to Pierre Poilievre and Goldie Gamari on September 18th, 2019. I'll read from the second paragraph. I said, "My mother recently came to stay at my house to keep an eye on things while I was deployed to Iraq. While I was away, my daughter received a phone call from CHIO. They scheduled an appointment for her to be seen at the Adolescent Metabolics Clinic by Dr. Stephen Fetter in April of 2019. I scheduled my leave from deployment so that I could attend this appointment. At this appointment, Dr. Fetter recommended that my daughter be put on puberty blockers in preparation for gender transition. I asked him to explain how he determined that my child was transgender. He said that that she had claimed to be transgender and that was sufficient evidence for his diagnosis." And I close on that email with, "Dr. Fetter was unable to provide any evidence whatsoever. He is now proceeding with the medical intervention without my support." And further down at the very bottom of the page, this is a reply from Pierre Poilievre himself. I had a conversation with him. As he says here, he says, "Thank you again for saying hello the other week and for sharing your thoughts with me over the phone on Friday, January 22nd. That would have been 2021. So I spoke to him on the phone for half an hour. I told him all about my experience with CHIO and how they started calling my daughter's phone directly the minute she turned 16, which is the legal age of consent for medical treatment in Ontario. I told him about the Dutch protocol that's been discussed here previously, puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and genital mutilating surgeries that are sterilizing kids at the age of 18 and below. I think we now understand in Nova Scotia, based on some reporting from Juno News. And he went on to vote for the conversion therapy ban 2 more times. So I bring this up because this is the situation that we're in here in Canada. We have the only Conservative Party in the world who still supports not conversion therapy, but transgender protocols for youth. Now, there is a policy statement that says that parents should be able to determine the fate of their children, but ultimately they failed to adopt a motion to repeal Bill C-4. So this is why we see all of these other countries rolling this back right now, and Canada is still in the dark ages. I caught up with him on the 30th of June, 2023, at a campaign stop.
Yeah. Hold my camera. Good to see you.
Yeah, sir, I insist we can take the photo.
So his goons couldn't quite keep their hands to themselves. I didn't get the shot of me asking him a question about this. Here he is a few months later, 7 February 2024, 2024.
Do you support age restrictions for puberty blockers and hormone therapies for trans kids?
I think that Justin Trudeau is trying to divide and distract Canadians by spreading disinformation about the decisions that premiers and parents are making.
I want to know your position. It's your own party policy at party
I think we
convention.
should protect the rights of parents to make their own decisions with regards to their children. And I believe that adults should have the freedom to make any decision they want about their bodies.
With minors,
I think
surgeries and medical interventions for minors, as your own party members suggested.
medical interventions like what?
That is the language that your party.
What medical interventions?
Well, you would have to ask your party members.
What medical
such as
interventions?
such as puberty blockers and hormone.
For minors?
Yeah. Yes.
Irreversible? You're talking about irreversible?
I'd like to understand your
I just want to be clear. No, I want to be clear. I just want to be clear.
Minors.
Puberty blockers for minors?
Do you agree with that? Do you agree with that?
I think that we should protect children and their ability to make adult decisions when they're adults.
So you
That would protect-
only
I think-
adults should make you said yes. Just to be clear, you said yes. Only adults should take puberty blockers.
I think we should protect children, let them make adult decisions when they become adults.
So that means you are against puberty blockers for kids under the age of 18. Is that
Yes.
clear? Oh.
He finally said it. You see how long that took? It's like nailing Jell-O to a wall. This is a petition I submitted, a House of Commons petition that I submitted in advance of this event, and it was for the purpose of repealing Bill C-4 and also Bill C-16 that was also mentioned here. And I sent this to Garnett Genuis, an MP for the Conservatives, for approval, for publication, for public signature. He declined. So I sent it to Leslyn Lewis. It sits there now. But this is the situation that we're in. None of these backbenchers, none of the rank and file of any of our established political parties will take this issue on because all of the senior-most members in the House of Commons voted for Bill C-4. This is the party hegemony right now. The rank and file are not going to go against the party hegemony for fear of losing their party status. There's George Orwell. The further a society drifts from the truth, the more it will hate those who speak it. And I can tell you, just from my experience on social media, that when I talk about my story, when I try to tell my story, I get more heat for criticizing the Conservatives on this issue. I get more heat from CPCers than I ever did from Antifa. I don't know what to tell you. We have a very monumental challenge before us here. And here's where we are today. There's, I think, a lot of questions around why this is happening. And I try to offer a little bit of my take and also some hope, I think, for the future. But here's where we are today. I believe that it's World War III. This is what historians will one day look back on and say that we were in World War III. And it's been 81 years. It'll be 82 next month since D-Day. 81 years before that was the Battle of Gettysburg and the American Civil War, and 82 years before that was the colonial triumph at Yorktown, the climactic battle in the American Revolution. It's called a fourth turning, or crisis era. It's a crisis era that we enter into every 4 generations. Once a human lifetime, essentially, the world goes to war. And this is Lana Wachowski, one of the creators of The Matrix. There were brothers who both transitioned. This was the first one, Lana Wachowski, who came out in 2012. 81 years before that, Magnus Hirschfeld performed the first biomedical gender transition in the Weimar Republic. And roughly 81 years before that, anti-cross-dressing laws proliferated across the US during the American Civil War. And roughly 81 years before that, there was a pastor who went by the name the Universal Friend, who claimed to have died of an illness and been reanimated as genderless. So this is kind of a natural constituent of the cycle of human history, the narrowing of the gender roles that takes place. Gradually, Since the end of the Second World War, in our case, where we had the broadest gender roles with the GI generation in the immediate aftermath of the Second World War, they were breadwinners, they were housewives, and as we progress one generation to the next, those gender roles get narrower and narrower until we arrive here with the complete destruction of gender. It's called a saeculum, or a great year, and it has a spring, a summer, an autumn, and a winter. This is winter. And like in a regular year, when days are at their darkest, winter in the great year is when times are at their darkest. And I'm putting this in here now because, well, I'm the guy who used to tell the troops, there are two things you got to remember when the chips are down. Number one, it's only temporary. Whatever it is you got going on, this too shall pass. And number two, it can always get worse. So, so whatever you do, don't make it worse. We do have the potential to fall to tyranny or state collapse every time we go into one of these crisis eras, but we also have an opportunity to shape the future, to shape a brighter future for our young people. And I just want to point out that this has been going on since the dawn of the species. Here is King Solomon, pride goeth before destruction, and a haughty spirit before the fall. And that's where we are now. So how do we get through it? Well, look to history. Here's Alexander Solzhenitsyn. Let your credo be this: let the lie come into the world, let it even triumph, but not through me. And this is my quote. So everybody's got to be open to criticism. This is how we keep each other honest. And all ideas need to be on the table as far as I'm concerned. And this forms the basis for our society. We are the freest thinking society. It's about having these conversations. Everybody has blind spots. I was just having this conversation with a trans person earlier today who came out to counter demonstrate us on the Hill. I said, everybody has blind spots. I have blind spots. You have blind spots. We need to be able to share our ideas freely. We need to be able to express our concerns and our criticisms in order to alleviate those blind spots. Otherwise, we're all going to be walking around in darkness with the blind leading the blind. And that was me. Yep, I coached cheerleading for 3 years. So my daughter actually broke off contact in 2023. She started on testosterone at the age of 20. She just had her healthy breasts amputated last September at the age of 23. So this is by far the hardest thing that I've ever had to go through in my lifetime. And I'm just kind of hanging out in the town where she lives, waiting to catch her when she falls. Might as well go after the monsters who did it to her while I wait. Thank you for your attention in this matter.
So before I get started, I wanted to point something out. When Jeff and I started talking about putting this together, one of the things that we wanted to do was make sure that we didn't kind of clutch into just a certain type of people from a certain type of society. So, I mean, I'm transgender. We have, the gay community covered here. We have the straight community covered here. We have the religious community covered here. We have the people that are not religious. I'm not religious, although when I do my speeches, a lot of times people have a tendency to say amen. So, please feel free to do so. But that's how we get things changed. is by everybody coming together. So I want to thank Jeff for putting this together. There, go ahead. Also, for 7 years, I spent telling my truth of what happened to me as I medically transitioned. And I've done what Kelly and Faith are doing here tonight. It's awfully hard. And I want to thank you both for doing so. I did it enough. I did it in What is a Woman and other places. So I've kind of changed a little bit. So I'll be doing a little bit of a different type of speech. But to do what they did today is very hard. It's very hard emotionally. So thank you so much. So here we go. My name is Scott Nugent. I'm 100% medically transitioned trans man, adamantly against medically transitioning children. I stand before you today not as a trans man, not as just a voice in the crowd, but as a mother. Someone who's given birth and carried life. A human being has lived through something I would not wish upon any child in this nation or any other. Medical transition. I stand before you today, Canada, with a simple truth, a truth that does not bend, a truth that does not change, a truth that does not fear the noise of the moment. And that truth is this. We cannot change our sex, and medical transition cures nothing, merely adds physical and mental complications we are just beginning to understand due to the experimental nature of this cosmetic medical procedure. No amount of medicine, and no amount of surgery, and no amount of belief can rewrite what we all know that's in our very being, our sex. And yet here we are, in a time when children are told they are born in the wrong body. In a time when confusion is called identity. In a time when discomfort is treated not with compassion, but with prescriptions. And I say to you today, this is not compassion. This is not care. And this is definitely not justice. This is something else. My knowledge of a process that is little known by many has created a fire inside me. A fire burning to burn the nonsense and to speedline the education about the realities of medical transition that is butchering an entire generation of Canadian children and all children worldwide. Butchering mind, body, and soul. A raging forest of lies we must burn to reveal the truth. A fire to educate Canada and fill protests with people chanting that children are not broken. They are beautiful as they are. There's the first one. A society where feminine men are celebrated and masculine women are revered. All who fall in between and accepted. Where true tolerance is practiced and conversion therapy from a feminine gay boy is not transitioned to some imaginary straight woman, and a masculine tomboy is celebrated. You are not wrong, we need to say to these kids. You are perfect, needed, and wanted, just as you are. I have a fire that one day we will protect the most vulnerable among us and not turn them into lifelong patients. Because let's be honest, there is a cost. And the cost is not just in dollars, though the billions are rising. Funding nonprofits and social media influencers to the elite 1% of our society, draining dollars from people who don't understand what they're promoting or what they're donating to. The dollars are not just in the medical field. They are entrenched in the new infrastructure of how we communicate as human beings, social media. A new market with a return on investment is to make our children sick in their bodies, sick in their minds, and full of delusions they have to chase for their entire life with the inability to capture peace because facts do not care about feelings. The cost, the almighty cost. It also costs in lives. It costs in broken futures. A cost in children who will never grow up to who they were meant to be. And if I ask you, as an adult like me could be convinced, if an adult like me could be vulnerable to the promise of a quick fix of fitting in, what chance does a child have? What chance does a 14-year-old have? A 12-year-old? An 8-year-old? When the whole world around them says, you are not enough the way you are. I stand before you as someone who believes that lie. I stand before you as someone who was told that changing my body would heal my pain. And I stand before you today as my most important role as a mother. It did not help. It did not cure anything. It only created something new, something permanent, something I must now live with every single day of my life. Chronic infections, vitamin deficiencies, pulmonary embolisms, heart disease, shortened life expectancy, all for a lie, all for a process that we are now starting to understand makes mental health worse. And so I ask you, Canada, are you willing to pause? Are you willing to at least question? Are you willing to say that just maybe we moved too fast? Are you willing to be considered a bigot today, to be a hero tomorrow, to save a generation of children? Because children deserve time. They deserve time to grow, time to struggle, time to understand themselves. They deserve love and not labels, guidance and not prescriptions, truth and not illusions. So I ask you, are you ready to be brave? Because we must be brave. Brave enough to speak when it's unpopular. Brave enough to stand when it's uncomfortable. Brave enough to be called names today so that tomorrow we may be remembered for protecting those who could not protect themselves. Because history has taught us one thing. Those that speak the truth in difficult times are rarely celebrated in the moment, but they are remembered. And I ask you, are you willing to stand today so that a generation of children may stand tomorrow unbroken? Are you willing to take the heat today so that children do not bear the consequences forever? Because our children are watching and they deserve better from us. They deserve the truth. They deserve protection. They deserve a future untouched by decisions they were never ready to make. And together across this great nation, let us rise in one voice from all communities together. Christians holding hands with gays, and gays holding hands with conservatives, conservatives holding hands with liberals, all holding hands together, mothers and fathers separating these stupid invisible fences that don't mean anything, with one clear voice, one unwavering voice that says children are not experiments. They are not prophets. They are not mistakes. Children are human beings. So I ask you again, are you willing to be considered a bigot today, to be a hero tomorrow? Because our children deserve us, not them. Our children deserve us to adult better. Thank you.
Okay, folks, so that concludes our presentations for the evening. We're going to move into the panel discussion now, where we'll bring all of our speakers up here on stage and open up the floor to Q&A. We have microphones available, I am told. for anybody that wants to come up and ask a question to our panel. And we're going to kind of move right into it because we got to make up a little bit of time. So we're going to move into the panel discussion now with everybody who spoke here tonight. We have microphones here and here for anybody who'd like to come up and ask a question. Just go ahead and line up along those microphones. And before we do, I want to introduce a new panelist here. Her name is Rose. She's a 21-year-old detransitioner who came all the way in from Montreal. And in case I didn't say this already, I really believe that this is the way forward on this issue. We need to empower the people who've been impacted by gender ideology to tell their stories. So that is the thinking that's gone into everything that we've done here today, from the Parliamentary Press Gallery to the Rally on the Hill and now our town hall. These are the people that have been ignored by our institutions, by our media, and I really think that we as adults, we have a duty of care to the younger generations, and so it's our job to raise them up and make sure that their voices are heard. So Rose, thanks very much for joining us. And that's not going to me.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for having us here. When you Google Ottawa Gender Clinic, you come up with a press release that came out, I think, within the last year. There's a Dr. Nicholas Cormier who opened the Ottawa Gender Clinic. It doesn't say where it is. It doesn't say who it serves. It doesn't say how the expenses are covered. I'm really curious, does it operate at multiple sites? Does it see out-of-province patients? Is this something somebody needs to look into? Should I be the person looking into it? Help me out.
I don't know the answer, but yes, look into it.
That's yours.
Go for it.
Excellent question.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is Vlad from Weir Foundation USA. You guys were all amazing. I can't thank you enough for these informative and very important issues. So I have a possible solution to a couple of the problems. I'd like to know whether or not this tracks. The first is that while many men seem to opt to go to a woman's prison in the event that they've been sentenced to prison, I'm willing to guess that no women who are trans-identified as men choose to go to a man's prison. I'm guessing. Maybe some of you know the stats. At the same time, many men identify as women for women's sports. And I believe that no women who identify as men opt to compete in men's sports. I mean, I could be wrong, but that I suspect the number is close to zero. So one wonders if the solution to both those issues isn't to create a trans sports league and a trans wing of a prison. And I would guess that the trans wing of a prison would be empty, and the trans sports league would also be empty.
To address that, to the best of my knowledge, and this information is from California, women on testosterone are allowed to voluntarily identify as female for the purpose of incarceration, and that is, to the best of my knowledge, what they opt to do.
Can I say something? On the first question, the answer is close to zero. We don't have, so in the context of the lawsuit, we're at early stages. There has not been disclosure on the part of the government. So we don't know the exact number. It's close to zero. From the perspective of the lawsuit, we're not proposing a solution. Ultimately, that's up to the government, that they can go back to the drawing board and decide what they want to do. That one option is a trans wing, as you say. Ultimately, that's, from our perspective, I'm sorry, it's not for the court to decide.
So from my perspective, talking about the trans men in sports, when we speak left and right, when we speak black and white, we kind of lose the gray, and gray is where we find all the peace. So the truth is that there are some trans men that do participate in men's sports. I don't remember the names. I think there's like 3 of them. Not very many, and they're not very many for a reason, right? But here's my proposal as a transgender person. Being transgender is a choice. It's cosmetic. Nobody made that choice for me, so nobody else should have to suffer for that choice. So if I get myself into trouble, and you stick me in a man's prison, well, I chose to medically transition. So we need to stop dancing around the transgender community. They made a choice. So we need to have grace in the idea that we need to make everybody else feel comfortable, because you guys didn't choose anything. So if a man chooses to medically transition into a woman and does a criminal act, he needs to get his butt in prison with a man. There it is.
My name is Jerry. I'm a retired physician for 46 years. I practiced for 46 years. And what you wonderful 9 people here tonight touched, just one of my daughters, my oldest daughter. And I think one of the times or positions where this topic and other topics of us as parents, when our children are growing up into this difficult time from 10 years of age into teenagehood, there's a lot of things of society and media and everything that is entering their unsettlement. And I, as a physician who worked 100 hours a week and really wasn't there, a marriage broke up, and that oldest daughter of 15 was a broken child with parents that weren't there. And that's there. And if there's anything I as a parent feel guilty of, and what people have shared, is if we as parents can embrace in our love and be there and be spreading the word of the love of Jesus into their heart, we wouldn't all be here perhaps as difficult. The wonderful thing in that daughter of mine 3 years ago, in her brokenness, she finally called Dad on Christmas Day and said, "I've accepted Jesus." And the words that have come out here through all of you is Jesus gave himself fully so that we all could be in his arms and his love. And from the difficulties of this world, we are not of this world, we're in Christ Jesus. I just thank you all for what you've shared with us tonight. Thank you.
I have a few questions. Is that okay?
Fire away.
Okay. So first, and to you. Today I was talking with some of the other side protesters, people that were defending trans rights, and they had very strong chants to that effect. When I went over to talk to them, I like to talk, I'm curious, I just need to know what other people are thinking and feeling. So I went over to talk, and one of the loudest ones that would talk was saying to me that we are wrong in our stats. Our stats are wrong, that the suicide rates are not higher after children or people transition, they're higher when they're not allowed to have access to care. What would you say to that? Because that's what I was told today.
That's absolutely false.
Yeah. So that child has been given wrong information?
No, Mia spoke about the methodological quality of the research with the systematic reviews of the evidence, of the research evidence. And the type of research this person is quoting is one where there's no controls. So they just ask people, do you like ice cream or would you rather have a peanut butter sandwich? And they're like, I would rather have ice cream for every meal. That's the quality of the research. So this is why they complain that systematic reviews of the evidence are transphobic. Because on average, less than 5% of the research qualifies based on its math to be considered in a systematic review, because they're looking at, does the way these numbers were gathered together support the conclusion that was drawn? So if I stood in the group of counter protesters today and I asked them, are you happy you were able to transition? They would all say yes. So I could then say 100% of people who transition are happy they transition. And that's the type of research that they're quoting.
Because we didn't ask anybody on the other side of the fence. Okay.
May I just add a little bit to that? The suicide studies, the high suicide rates, they confuse something called suicidality with completed suicide. So suicidality is somebody who considers suicide, has suicidal thoughts. And many of the young people seeking these medical interventions will report having considered suicide. Part of it, I think maybe they are actually suicidal because it's a very troubled group. And part of it is that's how you get what you want. You go in and you say, I'm suicidal. They're actually coached on Reddit. They're coached in trans communities to say, tell the person you're suicidal, that's how you get puberty blockers and hormones. So the numbers are very skewed when you're talking about suicidality. But we've got 2 or 3 studies that they're long-term national registry studies from the Netherlands and Sweden. So they look at every single individual who underwent medical transition. The Swedish one found that the men, around 10 years after completing, the men had 19 times higher completed rates of completed suicide compared to the general population. Okay. And the women, it was 40 times higher than the general population. And this is not suicidal thoughts, this is completed suicide.
Thank you. So these are the answers that I need to have in my mind and ready for next time, because general population, then just compare it to that. Easy. Okay.
There's something else. Can I just add to that as well? That what you're looking at a very disturbed population, right? Yeah. It's a distressed population before they start to transition.
Yes.
And actually the suicidal ideation rate this ideation is very much the same as it would be for children who have experienced severe trauma. It's the same kind of thing, because you're having individuals who've been through, and you've heard it.
Yeah.
The experiences of their life have traumatized them. And young people and adults who've been highly traumatized are very often suicidal and do commit suicide. But it's not higher than the general population.
So what I found when we were talking today on the Hill was we were actually able to come to some common ground, and that was that we need more mental health care in Canada, accessible to young people. Yeah. Period. We both agree that.
We need to stop creating mental health crisis in Canada.
That's yeah.
I'm not. I'm going to talk about suicidal ideation. I'm not going to let So here's the thing from a transgender perspective, right? We only have one study, and she was talking about the Swedish study that was done from 1973 to 2003, followed about 300 and something transgender adults. And what they found was exactly what the transgender activists are saying. When you first start medical transition, you get into euphoric stage, and that euphoric stage stays there for a while until you get done. And then when you get done, you kind of look left and you look right, and you go, that didn't help anything. And on top of it, I'm not really the opposite sex. You have to come to some kind of conclusion about it. And that's when suicidal ideation peaks. So the truth about this is that we're medically transitioning children that are suicidal to be the most suicidal 7 to 10 years after into a part of society that is the most suicidal of any males or females in that area. But you have to also understand that the studies that they're giving you, the studies that they're talking to you about, are the ones that are like 1 year. They do 1 year studies. They have 12 people to follow, or 2 years, or 24 months, or 3 years, or 4 years. They're not long enough because this is experimental. There's only one long-term study from that. And so, is that the Netherlands study? No, it's a Swedish study is what I'm talking about. So, yes, it's true. When you start medical transition, you don't fit in your whole entire life. You go to somebody that has a white jacket that says that, hey, if you medically transition, you're going to fit in. Well, holy heck, I'm going to do that. And then, you don't feel better. And then they go, well, you have to start puberty blockers. So you start puberty blockers. Okay, I still don't feel better, but I still need testosterone. And then you start testosterone. You go, well, I don't feel better, but I still need to get my top surgery. You don't get your top surgery. Then, no, I don't feel better because people are misgendering me. There's all kind of hate everywhere. There's hate everywhere. And then that stops because you start to pass as the opposite sex. And then, when I get my bottom surgery, I'm going to feel better. And what time frame is that? That's 7 to 10 years, right? So,
quite a long process. I guess I'll just ask my other questions to the people. Okay. Apparently other people.
Hi, my name's Tom. I'm from Ottawa. And first of all, I just want to say that over the past few years, I've listened to some testimonies by detransitioners. And each time I'm just blown away by the articulation and the courage that they exhibit. And it was the same here tonight. I just want to say thanks for your absolutely incredible testimonies. It was very emotional and it's very inspiring. So I just want to know, just on a more practical level, because everybody that's here tonight is going to feel convicted by what they've heard. What can we do on a practical level to make things change? As for myself, I have tried going in the past, going door to door with flyers and creating my own stuff and talking to people about trans issues. One of the things I find is the incredible lack of awareness among people in the public. And I think the impression I get is most people in the general public seem to think that the whole trans issue, it's like the gay rights movement. We have to be tolerant, we have to be compassionate. One thing they don't see through the media is the images of phalloplasty and vaginoplasty and top surgery. And you talk about informed consent. How could the public consent to this when they're not being shown these images? Now, I've also been doing some voluntary work lately. Sorry, I don't usually speak in public again. I've been doing some voluntary work lately for the Canadian Centre for Bioethical Reform, which is pro-life group. And one of the amazing things that they have is these huge posters with fetuses and stuff in them. People come up, they say, this is disgusting. And you say, yes, it is disgusting. Why do you think it's disgusting? And then they have to try and explain to you why. It's because it's obscene. I would love it if we had those same images to talk to people, to present to people about phalloplasty and vaginoplasty, and about the reality of trans, because people are not getting it. And I think that's one of the reasons why this is lasting so long in Canada, is because people aren't being told the truth. They're not getting it through the mainstream media. We need to have people on street corners with posters just like the pro-life people.
You have so much passion. I love it. I love the passion. I really do. We've got a lot of people up here that know a whole heck of a lot. What's the question?
Oh, what can we? I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. What's your question?
What can we do? What can I do when I go away from you
right now?
Oh, all right.
You do what you're doing right now, then you need to find somebody to support.
How do I find people?
I'm right here. She's right here.
All right then. All right then. Fine.
You can't find your voice when you support somebody who.
All right, I have one practical question. Just one. I tried getting stuff printed, right, with pictures of fireflies, but I couldn't find a printer to print them. If somebody can find me a printer, get it printed, I'll go out there and show people. That's all I'm
You're right there. I've been doing this for 8 years. I've been kicked off Twitter 4 times, been kicked off of Facebook 6 times. TikTok won't even let me put anything up at all. I've lost 4 jobs. I drive a car that has 200,000 miles on it. I used to drive a 535 BMW before I did this. Now I can't get into corporate sales. So you find a damn printer.
Okay. All right, thank you very much.
Staples on Main Street.
I was going to recommend Staples as well because I have done that.
Yeah. Just a comment on the last speaker. Not only are people ignorant, but government officials are so ignorant. I don't think they know half of what we've heard tonight. And it'd be great if we could get it to them. My question is that I, as previous speakers said, I just admire all of you that have testified tonight and have shown up in this regard. My only query is, I've noticed that all the trans people here have gone from women to men, or detransing back to women. I don't see any of the opposite. Is that a statistical thing where there are more or less? Or is it that they're less comfortable with showing up on this issue?
The men I know who have detransitioned are comfortable being public, but I wouldn't want to make that a generalization.
Okay.
I don't have any hard data for you, but thinking about it logically, the social contagion that started in 2015 struck predominantly adolescent girls. And they are now all emerging from it because they've all reached adulthood and they're mature and they're realizing the mistake that they made. So it would make sense that the social contagion of detransition would be predominantly female as well.
Yeah, and that was
Lisa Littman's study that on rapid onset gender dysphoria of that age group, and it was 85% of them were female. So a big percentage, and so that's what we're probably seeing.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say my name is Brian Mitchell. Sorry. First of all, I'd like to say this is quite an illustrious group here. I am so thoroughly impressed by what I've seen here tonight. I've got goosebumps all up and down my arms and legs right now to speak. You people are incredible. You provided so much information, and I'm overwhelmed with it, just trying to gather it all up. So I guess my first question is really quite generic. It's I'm curious to know how you spell.
Did we set the mics up for high challenge people?
Is it called? Is it?
Are we in the wrong conference room?
Is it called?
Tend to move it down, the tall people don't move it back up.
By the way, I love you, man. You are incredible. I watched you in there doing that with the out in the bush there, walking in the forest, and you are amazing, sir. You should have been the first very well. Like, what I'm curious is to know if I'm spelling Brandolini's law correctly. Would that be Brandolinis?
That is correct.
Wonderful. Okay, fantastic. Is it Hughes? Somebody's name here is Hughes?
Yeah,
Hughes. Oh, perfect. I don't know your first name. Is that your last name? Hughes? Anyways, you're incredible. I took down a lot of notes of things that you said. And What I was curious is I missed the first false claim, and I was wondering if you could repeat the first claim. What is it?
It was a slogan to protect trans kids. And then, is it that one or?
No, I think that, see, I've got, okay, I'll tell you what I do have. I've got gender affirming care is science-based. That's a fallacy. And I've got puberty blockers are fully reversible. That's a fallacy. Gender affirming care is life-saving. That's a fallacy. And I missed number 5. So that was going to be my next one. I missed 1 and 5.
Right. So the first one was protect trans kids. And it was just, I was explaining that there's no such thing as a transgender child. And the 5th one was every major medical association endorses gender affirming care, so-called. And I explained that while that's true, that just means every major medical association is captured and fell for the stunt that WPATH pulled.
Thank you. That's amazing. Brandolini's law, you say it's the vulnerable people who pay the price. The definition of Brandolini's law, in order for me to absorb that, in order for me to process that, I kind of need to know the definition. By definition, Brandolini's law is by a definition.
Well, actually, I'm glad you asked, because I talked to Scott about this before I came up on the stage. Brandolini's law, it's also known as the bullshit asymmetry principle. But I didn't want to swear in my talk.
She did it. I'm so proud of you.
So it just means it's very easy to just spout bullshit, but it's very difficult to refute that. You can spend. There's a journalist, Jesse Singal, who, somebody will say something, a trans activist will produce a garbage paper, and then this journalist is over here writing 4-part essay series, 3,000 words per essay, just to refute the simple nonsense that these people are putting out there. That's gender medicine. It's very easy to say gender affirming care is life-saving. It's very difficult to explain why that's nonsense.
Somebody had mentioned earlier on that this country is at war, and quite frankly, myself personally, I've known that this country's been at war for a considerable length of time. I'm noticing a lot of commonalities in the playbook with respect to how they manipulate these people into taking on these procedures and practices, which are so outrageous. But the COVID-19 campaign, in my opinion, was exactly the same playbook. Is there anybody here that would agree or disagree with that? It's the same playbook. In other words, what I'm saying is that there was 2 pillars of thought that the world was going to experience and was going to have an experience with a global pathogen giving rise to a universal vaccine template for which the entirety of humanity was to become dependent upon. So to me, it's the same playbook. To me, they're using the exact... Go ahead.
No, sorry. I usually intimidate people. I'm sorry. I didn't see. Go ahead.
No. If you see where I'm going.
No, so here's the thing. Here's what, in my opinion, and I'm right. The transgender craze has come along is, when I was 19, I marched in Washington for gay and lesbian rights. We went way too far with, gay marriage, and we pushed it. But there were just incredible gay and lesbian people just trying to fight for things like a man who's been with another man for 50 years, not getting kicked out of the hospital when he was dying because the religious family kicked him out. We were fighting for something that was worth fighting for. Yeah. And so we saw it happen with Pride, which you have, all the kind of perverts coming to, boiling to the top. And we didn't say anything, and that was our fault. And so in 2015 was when we passed gay marriage, right, in the United States, and around the same time here. So what happened with all of the organizations that were funded to actually get these laws passed? Well, for example, Stonewall in the UK, which is a huge LGBTQ organization, claimed bankruptcy in 2015 because we got what we wanted. And that's the worst thing to happen in politics, and it's the worst thing to happen in activism because there's no more donations coming in. Well, in 2016, Stonewall went from bankruptcy to a 32% year-over-year growth with a nonprofit. Do you know how they did that? They signed on to mermaids to medically transition children. So I think that you're trying to find a solution to why this happened other than why everything happens in our society, which is money and greed.
Yeah.
So what happened, thank you. What happened is that that they found something that was literally a horrible thing to do to children, and it's taking decent people, educated people. I don't think I'm, the brightest person in the world, but I don't think I'm stupid.
Well, you're pretty smart.
And so convincing us that you don't fit in, this is how it's going to work, and it's wrong, right? So what did that do? That populated different organizations, and whether or not you like them or don't, you've got Turning Point, who went from getting $1 million 5 years ago in donations. They're up to almost $200 million. They were up over $100 million before Charlie Kirk got killed. So we've got both sides making an enormous amount of money, and then we've got all the social media stars underneath. So it's not as devious as what you think it is. It's about money and it's about greed.
That's it.
I would add a big harm of making a lot of money off of both of those as well. Exactly. And
that's where we're going with this.
It's the same sloganeering, take it or you'll die.
Yeah, that's exactly.
And with that, guys, we
I do apologize.
I think I have one real thing I'd like to ask.
5 minutes.
No, I had a really important question I wanted to ask.
I'm sure we do.
No, I'm desperate for an answer to it.
A quick answer?
Short. It's basically a long question.
Oh, okay.
Problem. Okay. Because I'm really desperate for.
Now says you have 15 seconds.
Really? Okay. I am a bisexual autistic woman from Ottawa. I'm in a lot of online and offline communities. Unfortunately, most of these communities have been radicalized, except for ones that are about the sort of issues we're talking about this evening. I have been removed and ostracized from at least 2 communities for expressing my viewpoint to individuals who I believed cared about my confidentiality and safety, but cared more about, quote unquote, protecting their gender diverse members. Most of the real world friends I've had for 20 years or more have become radicalized and would seize all contact with me if they knew I was here. Some of them were once reasonable people, and now they're sharing posts saying things like, I quote, complaining about trans girls in sports will not make your daughter run faster. I am very isolated, and I feel like I'm always working on eggshells. I have known trans people all my adult life, and they would not support and would be disgusted by what this activism has become now. In fact, I talk to these people every single day. I feel like this modern activism is harming them, women, children, autistic people, and the gay, lesbian, and bisexual community. And I am an honest person who is very uncomfortable lying or keeping quiet about something I feel harms people. I want true friends and perhaps a girlfriend, but I feel suffocated. I'm wondering what I could do to be able to breathe and find people who I can actually talk to and be honest with. I'm told that they're out there and I shouldn't give up, but I do not know where to look and feel like I am stepping on mines at every turn.
So the question is, how do you meet people?
Yes, the question is, how do you actually meet people who I can talk to about these things without...
Is Athena still here? She's with LGBT Alliance.
Yes, she know.
Yeah. Yeah. So there are, I think, more people out there who are similarly aligned to you than you realize. And I'm glad that you point out the radicalization element of this too, because we have seen an inordinate amount of not only radicalization, but extremism, I think, coming from this subset of the hard left. And that is not to say that even I'm talking about like trans people, but Tyler Robinson, for example. He wasn't medicalized. He didn't identify as trans, but he was radicalized.
Yes, he had a trans
boyfriend. My partner was trans. And there's a lot of just incredibly over-the-top messaging in this, with whether it's the trans rights or human rights or trans genocide type messaging. Now, if you believe that Charlie Kirk is advocating for trans genocide and you love a trans person, now it's not his belief is not founded in reality. But if you accept that as a belief, then it's probably not that far a leap to go. It's not that illogical a thing to kill him. And that's not an endorsement of, homicide. But if you could go back in time and kill Hitler, would you do it? These are the kinds of questions. And I'm glad somebody is shaking their head. But these are the kinds of questions that these people are asking people. I think it's a very dangerous ideology. But a lot of other people out there are seeing it, I think, for what it is. And I think there are more of them than you realize. So I would recommend you get in touch with LGBT Alliance.
And I would also say that, talking about, if you think that Charlie Kirk hated transgender people, no, did he? No,
he didn't.
Total genuine dude. Please.
Something that I found was also very helpful for myself. I found groups that had to do with interests that I enjoyed that had nothing to do with my gender or the trans community. So like knitting, any sort of craft, music, animals, go volunteer at an animal shelter.
Oh, you'd be surprised.
No, but that's the thing. If you find a group that isn't based in the trans stuff, then ideally you will also find people who are not based in it. And so even if there are people in the group, focus in on the people who have nothing to do with it and who will speak truth with you, not against, right? Yeah.
Okay, most. So we do have a time limit at the end of the day. This is a great discussion. I'd like to keep it going as long as we possibly can. But we are at our time limit as of right now. And I just want to say thanks to Bikers Church for everything that they did. Everybody who volunteered. I gotta say, it was really amazing. It took so much pressure off me as an organizer to have these guys involved. They are outstanding. And if you know anything about the history of this church and its involvement in, I don't know if we're still calling it the freedom movement or not, but how about the truth movement? Yes. I know these people. I love them. They're wonderful. And I think Melissa gets, what is it? You want an award for having a token atheist coming to your church on Sunday? That's me. I'm a token atheist who stops in at the church when I'm in Ottawa on Sundays. So I love you guys. I think everything that you're doing here is wonderful, and it was a real pleasure. I think this was a perfect setting for a great panel like this. With that, I'd like to invite Rob up to finish things out with a prayer.
Yeah, give it up one more time for Jeff and Hannah.
Don't get asked
All the time. Bikers Church, that's that political church. And I always address things. I said, actually, we're not political. I said, because the problem is the church has remained silent on all of these issues for too long. And the government has begun to step into where the church should have been. And the problem isn't that the church has now become political. It's the problem is the government has become spiritual. Yeah. And when the government begins to dictate sexuality, when the government dictates who lives lives and who dies, when the government begins to step in and crosses that line, and then when the church finally gets its voice, church is not political. The church is just doing what it should. And this topic matters.
Yes.
Transgenderism matters. It is a huge thing. It is not a political thing. It is a God thing because God is the one who defines sexuality. It says it right in his word. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. Sexuality was God's idea. It's not the government's idea. It's not the pharmacy's idea. So I am thankful for every single one of these people up here that we as the church now, as standing in that place to be welcoming. I tell you, the church should be the safest place for anybody that is struggling with gender identities. It should be the single place for them to be able to come in and find hope, and find healing, and find restoration, and find what life is all about. The problem is the church hasn't handled this subject too well. So thank you for addressing that and bringing that to our attention. And I want to just pray as they go their way that this is not the end of something, but really the beginning, that maybe in your heart there is now a passion ignited, that you can be a voice, that you can begin to stand for the kids that have no voice. And I think let's see this begin to have a ripple effect across not only this nation, but across this globe. So Father, thank you. Thank you for who you are. God, I thank you for this panel and for their wisdom and for their stories. God, I pray your blessing over them. I pray as they leave here, God, all that they've given out, that they would be refreshed, filled, inspired to continue to be a voice, sounding the alarm in this world. God, I pray that your hand would rest upon them in all that they do. Father, we pray that this is not the ending, it's the beginning. And we pray that if we leave here today armed with information, God, that we would walk knowing that you have a plan and a purpose, that you are sovereign, and you know the beginning from the end, that we can trust you, and that with you, all things are possible. So God, I pray for all of these people here that were received tonight, that they would go and continue to stand, continue to fight, continue to be a voice. And we look forward to hearing the stories. We look forward to seeing the lives that will be transformed, the kids that will be saved as we declare truth and righteousness. And we ask this in your wonderful name. And all the good looking people said, amen. And thank you guys for coming.